Excellent. Welcome everyone to this evening's special talk by David Bondurant. Our speaker has been involved with the computer and semiconductor industry for 50 years. He was a computer architect at Control Data, Ferry Univac, and Honeywell. He was involved with the government-sponsored advanced semiconductor program called VHSIC, Very High-Speed Integrated Circuits, at Univac and Honeywell, where he developed microprocessor and ASIC semiconductor products in bipolar CML, CMOS, and radiation hard CMOS. He was involved with emerging non-volatile RAM marketing at industry-leading companies, Ramtron, Fram, Simtech Non-Volatile SRAM, and Freescale Semiconductor Everspin Technologies. Welcome, David, and thank you so much for spending this quality time with us tonight.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me figure out how to get the presentation up here for everyone. Okay. And then I figured out that I've got to go to full screen mode. Okay, so can we see that? Is everybody okay?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Looks great. Don't forget, everybody, we have the chat window open, and many of us have met one another. There's a new person who just joined, then maybe others will join. But please keep active in the chat if you have questions and conversations. The side discussion is always exciting. And the speaker, would you like to have us wait till the end to ask questions, or would you like us to raise our hand?
Well, with a small group, I think you just, unless we get a lot of feedback, I say, you just speak whenever you have a question or want to make a comment or whatever.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, so just to tell you what I do, I do a few original talks, but in the case, in a couple of cases, I've done book reviews. And so what we're going to do tonight is a book review of Geniuses at War. And the subtitle is Bletchley Park, Colossus and the Dawn of the Digital Age. And so, and it's by a guy named David A. Price. And so we're going to talk about what's the content of that book, which is an area of interest to me because it's the first digital computer. And so I'm kind of a history buff. And so I've been doing a little study, where I can, of all the different computers that were developed back during World War II. And so we'll get through that as we go through here. Okay, next step is to figure out how to get it advanced. There we go. Okay, so the book is by David A. Price. It was released in 2021, so it's what, I guess 3 years old now. It tells the story of British code breakers during from World War I to the period of World War II, after World War II. And so a lot of the information that you're going to get out of this was classified information by the British government until just in the last few years. And so it's new information. Okay. Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, well, maybe I can't. I'm trying to move the thing off the screen. Okay, so first of all, just to explain, I have, follows up a talk that I did in 2022 on American code breakers. But basically, back in that time frame, I was describing how Univac, where I worked in the 1970s, basically, they emerged from World War II Navy code breaking activity to become the leader in standard military computers for the US Navy. And so I had done this talk on the history of Univac back in 2022. And so during that talk, we got to know a bunch of computers built by the United States and Britain, and notably ENAC, Whirlwind, EDVAC, EDSAC, EDSAC-2, Atlas, and Atlas-2 computers. And so these computers were being developed starting in about 1943 as the United States entered World War II. But this book that I just read, tells a more recent story. And so we find out that the British code breakers were working on computers a few years earlier. And so on the right there, you can see the title slide of my talk back in 2022. And if you care to watch that or watch that video, which it's recorded, you can go to that Dropbox location. If anybody on the talk today wants a copy of this thing, if you could put your email into the chat box, we could get that sent out to you. Okay. Okay, well, let's get started in the story. So we're going to talk about Bletchley Park. Basically, back in World War I, the British had a lot of rivalry between the different services in code breaking. And so, and that's pretty much the same story that happened to the Americans in World War II. People like the Army and the Navy basically have their own code breaking operations, and there are conflicts here and there. And so basically after World War I, the British decided to combine their code breaking activity into a single unit, which you can see is called the Government Code and Cipher School, and it's located in London. And so it's run by the Navy, the Admiralty, and a guy named Alexander Denniston. And it's a small group of people, about 40 people. Little demand, as I say, for code breaking after the war. They were just primarily breaking diplomatic messages to understand what's going around the world. But by 1923, as Alexander Denniston is reporting to C, the head of the SIS or MI6, and his name is Hugh Sinclair. And he's got this unusual nickname, Quex. And so Quex is using the code breakers to monitor German developments after Versailles. Basically, it didn't take them too long till they're breaking the Versailles Treaty and developing a military in the background. And we're observing that, through code breaking activities. And so even though Prime Minister Chamberlain of Britain kind of, downplayed their military ambitions in the background, Quex and the MI6 is saying, hey, he's not a good guy. And he's preparing for war. And so they basically are getting ready. And so in 1937, the code breakers basically start staffing up. And by 1938, they have moving the operation to the countryside to be away from future bombing campaigns. And so they picked this place called Bletchley Park. And so you can see a picture of the mansion, which is the main headquarters. Was there a question? Can you see it okay?
Yeah, I can.
The picture on the right is a little bit teeny, at least on my 14-inch screen. If it was up on my 32-inch screen, I could tell you. But what you can see in there is the main mansion. You can see it right next to it, a thing called the Polish Memorial. So we're going to find out more about why there's a Polish memorial. You can see a whole raft of huts that we're going to hear more about. And then down there at the bottom, you can see the National Museum of Computing, which is a British computer museum, which might be interesting to go see sometime. I haven't been yet. Anyways, what we learn is that the code breakers that they hired were what they call classicists. In other words, they were good with language skills, but and because that's what they did with code breaking, hand code breaking back in the day. The mathematicians were not being recruited because there was nothing about it that was mathematics. But that changed. And so here's Enigma. I think you probably have heard of that. Enigma apparently was a 3-wheel German cipher machine that was developed right after World War I. And so the one I see has got 3 wheels. I believe that it got modified, and the military basically adopts this thing in 1926 to encrypt communications for the Navy. And so they added some more wheels, I think a total to 5. And that plug board thing in the front, can scramble up the information. And so that just makes it more difficult to decrypt the code. The operator types the message in and you basically set it up with a predetermined key list. And then the output comes out in the form of lights, as you can see. And so they were already having difficulty decoding this Enigma code since it challenged the traditional code breaking techniques. And they finally concluded that mathematics might be required to unravel the secrets. So then in 1938, they began hiring some mathematicians. Now here's why they got the Polish memorial. Basically in July 1939, they basically went to the Polish Cipher Bureau and learned that the Poles have been reading the military codes for 6 years now. And the reason that they were doing that is they had trained a bunch of undergraduate mathematics students in code breaking. And so you can see the names of 3 Polish students that had created an analysis of the signal that enabled them to build a device, which is called a bomba. And so you can see the 6 bomba devices there that are reconstructed Enigma engines that they can run through and test the Enigma settings until they uncover the correct setting. And so that was a pretty good idea. But unfortunately for Poland, this meeting, of course, occurs in July. In August, Quex gets home and he evacuates everybody to Bletchley Park because he sees that the war is imminent. And so literally a month later, Germany enters Poland and World War II begins. So what's happening at Bletchley Park during the war? As you can see, it's organized by teams, depending on the type of code that they're trying to decode. There's a thing called Hut 6 that handles German Army and Air Force. Hut 8 is that's right in the center of the picture. So you can see the hut that the Navy Enigma is in. And then there's huts for the Italian and Japanese codes. And so you got all these different people working on that. Total of 8,700 people, men and women, working 24/7 in 20 buildings. So it's a huge enterprise. Now, the Hut 6 was pretty good. They learned how to use the Luftwaffe ciphers, the Air Force, by October 39. The Italian Navy was broken in 1940. But and the reason that they can break these codes is that the operators make various errors that allow us to figure out the settings of the machine. Hut 8 was having some problem though, because the Navy is a little bit more disciplined than the rest of them. Okay, well, now we're going to talk about Alan Turing. I think you've all heard of Alan. He is the first mathematician, or one of the first, I guess, to be hired by the code school. You can see that he was pretty smart in math. He basically went to a very selective secondary school. He won a scholarship to King's College, Cambridge, graduated in 1934 as one of the top students and became a fellow. I don't know what it takes to be a fellow of the college, but I assume you got to be fairly notable. And he's basically off working on his, I guess, master's degree or something, because he's attending lectures on the foundations of mathematics, being taught by a 38-year-old faculty member, a guy named Max Newman. We'll hear more about Max later, but one of the problems that they're studying is what they call the decision problem. And so the question is, can math problems be solved with a general predetermined process carried on in a mechanical manner, which is basically an algorithm? Turing is struck by this conversation, and so by 1936, he's written an article, and you can read the name of it, but basically his article proposes a hypothetical universal computing machine or computer. And so Turing apparently is so well respected that he's sent to Princeton. He meets a guy named Alonzo Church. I'd never heard of him, but apparently he had equally kind of come up with this idea of a computing engine. And then another guy at Princeton is John von Neumann, a famous, the von Neumann architecture. And so in 1937, this church apparently has been talking to Turing, but he coins the name of the new computer. It's the Turing machine. Okay, so we've all heard, I think, a lot about Turing and what they called the Bombay. And so basically, he is recruited and he arrives in Bletchley Park right as the war is starting. So, literally within 4 days of Poland being bombed by the Germans, he's in Bletchley beginning work. And so he's briefed on this Polish machine to decode Enigma. He sets about overcoming its limitations. And so the key thing that the Bomba depended upon was what they called double enciphering, where they, I think, sent the message twice. And Turing basically had figured out that maybe the Germans will get smarter here one of these days. And so he develops this Bombay machine, and they use a thing called cribs that looks at logical absurdities in the text to figure out how to decode it and reduce the time. And so he working with the British tabulating machine. So presumably Britain had a company that was building these mechanical computers back in the time. And so they're going to design this Bombay thing. And he ordered it in late 1939, right when this war is starting. It's a mechanical equivalent of 36 Enigma machines with some additional wiring. So that's, you can see a picture of Turing looking at that machine from this movie called The Imitation Machine, which you might have seen. So even with that Bombay, Hut 8 wasn't able to decode thing with what they call pinches. And so what they needed is code books that would give them a hint on what the settings are, or an Enigma machine that they could quickly break the code with. And so in 1940, they captured a German vessel in Norway and its code book. And this allowed them about 5 days of decoding of the messages before the Germans caught on. It wasn't until the spring of 41 that the British captured a U-110, a damaged U-boat, along with its equipment. And I think everybody may have seen that Enigma movie where that was kind of the heart of the problem. And so once they got that, and then they started capturing these weather trawlers, they were getting constantly some information and that helped them decode it. And so the time required to decode these Navy messages was sufficient that they could now know where the U-boats were and neutralize them in the North Pacific, or more North Atlantic, sorry. And that was a problem. They were having a hard time getting the supplies they needed. And so the big problem is going forward, they didn't have enough equipment. There was just not enough Bombay equipment. And so only 6 of these units were delivered by August 1941. In October of that year, they basically went over the head of everybody to Churchill, explained their problem, and he basically increased the priority. And by the end of the war, over 200 of these machines were in operation. Okay, well, I promised you, I talked about the American program. So here's more detail. Basically, because the U.S. was not really in the war until later, they didn't get cranked up to do code breaking. And so there's a thing called Seesaw, the Communications Supplementary Activity Washington, and a group known as Op20G that does the code breaking. And one of their people, Joseph Dash, led the effort on the American side to develop an enhanced Bombay. And so the one that we're going to develop works better than the British one. It was designed and approved in September 1942. And so Americans build theirs at a place called the Naval Computing Machinery Laboratory, which is built at an NCR facility in Dayton, Ohio. And so that's where that machine on the right that you see was being built. And so Alan Turing obviously been consulting with the Americans. He comes over to visit in December of 1942 to see the first production of one of these units. And so it's finally delivered in January 1943. And so the American operation is done at that Seesaw headquarters, which is at I think it's I don't know if it's a monastery or some kind of a school on the high ground of Washington, D.C., where they can receive signals from submarines and things. And so they begin operation in June of 43. They build a total of 121 of these units for the American operation, and we run with about 3,000 people to decode messages using this machine. Okay, well, that's kind of what we've heard in the past. Okay, in other words, what I heard from the movies was Enigma was the big thing. We solved the problem of the North Atlantic, and we were able to win the war. Well, it's not that simple. Okay, so what you see here is what's called the Lawrence SZ42 cipher machine. And so this is called by the British the Tunny. And the key thing here is that they started working not with Morse code, but with teleprinters. And so basically they were receiving 5-bit code, not Morse code anymore. And you can see that by 1942, this enhanced version of this machine was being used by the German High Command to communicate with commanders throughout Europe. And so as you can see, it's got 12 rotors rather than 5. And so it's a lot more complicated to debug the decryption. And so following the German invasion of Russia, you can see that the British started receiving this new kind of radio communications that they never heard before, this teletype. And they figured out that it was, after a while, they figured out it was a 5-bit teletype code that they were receiving. And so the job of decoding this fell to this guy named John Tillman. He's the top cryptographer who had helped break the Russian communist codes following the Russian Revolution. So it sounds like the British were eavesdropping on the communists during, after, I guess it was 1919 or sometime. He decoded 6 Japanese military codes before World War II, and he was involved in decoding the German police codes early in the war. And so he's a pretty sharp guy. And so he figures out that the machine has 12 rotors just by observing the data stream. But the other thing he observes is that this whole signaling system seems to follow a 1919 AT&T patent. And so that certainly helped understanding how the machine worked. And so he learned that they were transmitting the key stream at the beginning of the message. And from this, he concluded that a pseudo-random data was being generated, using that key stream to create an encrypted message. And so he successfully just decrypted one of the messages before the Germans got smart and got rid of sending the key stream along with the message. And so at that point, it became a problem. They couldn't decode it. And so in 1941, he turns the problem over to their research group. It's headed by a guy named Gerald Morgan. And in October, he's handed a decoding problem to a young guy that they call William Tude. So here's the background on William. You can see that over in England, who your parents are is a big deal. So he's the son of working class. He's good at math. He won a scholarship to a secondary school. He entered Cambridge on a chemistry scholarship, but he was interested in math. He graduated in chemistry, but he then kind of started focusing on math once he was recruited by Bletchley Park in the spring of 1939. And so he comes on board with the war effort. Tude basically spent his time doing statistical analysis of these messages, and he was able to determine the three size of 3 of the wheels based just simply on the missing letters that were in the text that was coming through. And the research group with him determined the size of all 12 wheels without actually seeing the machine, just from the data. In 1942, what he did is he observed that he could create a thing called a dot count. And I don't know quite how he did that, but the dot count allowed them to score, the best wheel setting. And so they could basically, calculate the first two wheels by using that dot count, and then they would repeatedly do that until they solved the problem of what the setting was. And so this is a statistical approach to decryption without any special cribs or code books, as we saw with Enigma. Unfortunately, it takes just a huge amount of hand labor to execute that algorithm. And so it's impractical. But another group, a member of the group in the research group, you remember Max Newman. He's a guy that taught Alan Turing, and he's running this group that, and he thinks it's kind of an interesting problem that he needs to solve. So here's the story on Max. Max was older. He was born in 1897. He's from Germany. His father is from Germany, and his mother is an English farmer's daughter. He receives a scholarship to St. John's College, Cambridge, in math, but he gets called into World War I, and so he's gone for a while, but he returns, finishes his school with distinction, and becomes a fellow. In 1935, he's the guy that taught Turing about the decision problem. And as the war starts, he's still teaching in Cambridge when a future Nobel laureate, and I don't know who Patrick Blackett is, but he's apparently a famous Nobel laureate, has recommended his professor to Bletchley Park. And so Newman, basically heard that presentation on how to solve the algorithm. He recognizes that a computer could solve that problem faster. And so he presents a proposal to build a high-speed machine to decrypt the code. And so he's put in charge of that machine. Alan Turing, had worked with a young designer from the British Post Office, a guy named Tommy Flowers, and he is recommended as the chief designer of this new digital machine. And so here's the background on Tommy. He's kind of a down-to-earth guy. He's a working class parents, and so he didn't have a lot of money. But age 12, he's won a scholarship to a thing called the East Ham Technical College. And so he's an upward-comer. He begins working on an apprenticeship in mechanical engineering with the Royal Arsenal. Now, I don't know exactly what the Royal Arsenal is, but I suspect it's a military facility. And then he then won a training program with the British Post Office. And so he doesn't have a degree at this point. He's basically apprenticing, if you will, working with the General Post Office, but he's working on electromechanical telephone switching systems. And so he receives a electrical engineering degree at night while he's working, and he moves to the research department where he becomes familiar with electronic tubes. And so he's, what they're doing with tubes at that point is building simple radio systems that are used in a network to control the operation of those electromagnetic switching systems. But he gets a chance to experiment with tubes as digital electronics. And so he's been recommended by Alan Turing because Alan had worked with him briefly in 1941, where they tried to enhance the Bombay with a tube-type analog add-on processor. And so Flowers basically concludes that they're going to need a digital solution if the system is to be fast enough and reliable enough to solve this statistical problem. In February 1943, he proposes a completely digital machine called Colossus Mark I. So this would be the first digital computer. Was there a question? Okay. Anyways, it's never that simple, is it? It turns out there's a political battle. Basically, Flowers proposes his digital computer, but there's other people that are also proposing, and so his feeling was that the electronic tube was reliable enough to develop a fully electronic solution, but he did conclude it would take a little bit longer to develop that solution, in a fully digital solution. This guy named Wynne Williams of the Telecommunications Research Establishment in Britain felt that tubes were unreliable. They just couldn't expect it to work all the time. And so he proposes a hybrid computer being built out of an analog tube logic, but a bunch of relays, just like the original Bombay, and it would be built by the British Tabulating Machine Company. And so what they do is they end up selecting the Wynne Williams solution as the sole solution for Bletchley Park. And that machine is called the Heath Robinson machine. Heath Robinson apparently is not a complimentary term. Basically, it would be known as a kludge. Okay, it was, kind of like patched together thing. And so it had two problems. It was slow. It take a long time to process a message, and it was unreliable because it was analog. The computer it was using was analog, and so it would get a different result just about every time. And so the thing was working, however. By September of 1943, the Heath Robinson was processing 2 or 3 messages a week, but that was just a fraction of the total message volume that they needed. So it turns out that Flowers and the post office had their own funding, and they basically went off and built Colossus Mark I on their own funds. And they did, basically were communicating with Bletchley, but they did it on their own. And so you can see the Colossus Mark I on the right. And so it consists of a high-speed paper tape input. That's basically the coded message, the 5-bit teletype code that's fed into the thing at high speed. There's a 1500 tube logic unit, which is programmed with switches and plug boards. And so it's the program memory is basically manually programmed. And then finally, the teletype, which you can see sitting, is the output. And so it's the first fixed program computer. As you can see down here, it was delivered in January 18th, 1944. And so if you go to my other talk, you'll find that most of the other computers are being delivered later than that. Notably ENIAC, the American program, gets done really kind of after the war. And so, or was used in a limited sense, if you will. Anyways, Colossus is ultimately transported to Block F in Bletchley Park in January. There are already 3 of these Heath Robinsons running there. And so by February, they're ready to try it. And so they turn it on, they load a known message, and it was decoded in 10 minutes. And so it's 500 times faster than the Heath Robinson that they were using. That was a kind of a mixed mechanical and electrical. And it fully decoded the high command messages automatically. And so Churchill, hearing this, basically immediately orders 12 more of these things, and he wants it by June 1st, 1944. That was kind of an impossible task. Flowers could only, find the components to build one more in that time frame, but the team kind of figured there must be something special about that date. And of course, that's 5 days before the invasion of Europe. So it's a good thing to have those things around. So Flowers, basically, after he delivers that first one, begins work on a Mark II version of this thing. And so what they've decided to do is do a parallel processor that processes all 5 bits of the code in parallel. And so the tubes increased to 2,400 tubes. They apply 4 logic designers, a large team of junior engineers to design the PC boards. They have 40 production workers building the thing in Manchester, and they assemble 3 of these units in parallel. And so the first of these units arrived in time to be vital. It doesn't say the date, I guess, but before June 1st. And so they were able to contribute to Operation Overlord, or D-Day. And by October that year, they had 10 of these units installed. So, let's summarize what they've done here. They've basically the first use of binary electronic circuitry at scale. So more than one, just a couple of gates, they're building a whole arithmetic logic unit. And so they're the first to run an ALU at high speed. And high speed, as you can see, is 5 kilohertz at that time. And it's the first programmable machine. Apparently Babbage and Turing both had proposed concepts for this, but nobody had actually built one of these things. So that's the Colossus. Okay, well, so what did this do? Well, Operation Overlord depended on deception. They basically needed to convince the Germans that they're going to attack at Calais rather than in Normandy. And so they were able to basically confirm the deception by reading their messages. They learned the deposition of the German troops, where they were located. They modified some of their drop zones to avoid the Germans, and they decrypted Rommel's entire 50-page assessment of their defense and tactics. And so they basically knew an awful lot about the enemy when they went in. And even Rommel had kind of started to figure out that things were not entirely cool, because he felt that his messages were being decoded. So, of course, following D-Day, they kind of figured out that they had figured that out, and so they modified their cipher almost immediately. But the new programmable machine allowed them to adjust to those changes almost instantly, and so they allowed them to recover and continue to decode messages from the Germans during the war. Okay, well, what happened after that? Well, it's not too long until VE Day. And so as soon as they won the war, they stopped producing these Colossus machines. They kept running the Japanese section through the VJ Day, which I can't remember, but it seems like it's another year later. But for security's sake, what they do is they decide to actually destroy and obliterate all record of Bletchley. So they destroy all the hardware and documentation in the facility. They just chop it up and put it in a dump somewhere. But they did keep a couple of these Colossus machines around in an undisclosed location. The other thing they did at the end of the war is they started assessing what the Germans were doing, in terms of code breaking. And so what they learned, of course, is that the Germans had a program. They had broken the British naval codes early in the war. The Germans had been monitoring communications, what they considered to be secure communications between Churchill and Roosevelt. And the Germans were working on speech encryption technology. In other words, because they knew that they could break this audio communications, they were wanting to prevent the Allies from listening on their speech communications. At the end of the war, basically the head of Bletchley, this Edward Travis, is made a knight commander of the British Empire. Turing and Newman are given the OBE, or the Officer of the British Empire, but Newman declines. He basically is insulted that basically he and Turing are not made knight commanders. I don't know what the distinction is exactly, but they basically saved the country And then Flowers, for his part, gets an even smaller award of member of the British Empire. In any case, I might pause for just a second and see if there's any questions up to this point.
I was wondering if you have any of the statistics on the statistics of how hard it was for them to crack the code. So like if you were able to see, for example, the typos that certain people who are key operators make that give you the clue of who it is that's operating it, do they have like lists of the names of the operators for these statistics that they study? Do they have like a really good understanding of who it was they were actually listening to when they were interpreting these things?
I didn't get that from the text. Now, I would encourage you to read the book. And you probably might learn more than what I've communicated here because there's quite a bit of content there, but I don't remember a lot of discussion of the details of the statistical decoding, for example, other than that dot code as being critical. And so I can't give you too much more insight into how they did it.
Yeah, and just, because like when people speak in a certain way and they type in a certain way, it probably comes out in their messages, right?
Oh, well, I can tell you about that. Early on, one of the key things is that messages from Hitler, he liked to sign his name. So every message that he would send, it would, be his title and his, the Führer of Germany and Adolf Hitler. And since that appeared in every one of his messages, that was kind of a dead giveaway on decoding that message. In other words, something that's regularly occurring allows you to figure out, where it will reside in the message and help you decode. And so that's the kind of stuff. And then, of course, the Germans would make mistakes like not changing the key code every day, or they would, as you heard earlier, they would broadcast the key along with the message to make it easier. And things like that, but they learn from their mistakes over time.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to tell you a little bit about what happens after the war. And so you remember Max Newman, he's the guy that ran the group that built the digital computer. And so Max became the head of the mathematics department at University of Manchester. And he then proceeds to put together a team to build the first stored program computer. He calls it the Manchester Baby. And so if you go look at the IEEE milestones, that milestone was just celebrated about a year ago for the Manchester Baby. And it was demonstrated in June of 1948. So you can see a picture of the Manchester Baby. And the key thing about the next generation of computers is that it has a RAM, random access memory to load the program into. And so that RAM is called a Williams tube or electrostatic storage tube or EST. Now these things are not too fast. They're actually pretty darn slow. In my other talk, we quantify that. It's about 25 microseconds access time. So basically what they're doing is writing things on a screen of a storage tube and then reading it back. Is what they do electronically. Anyways, Alan Turing would end up joining Newman at the University of Manchester in 1948. We'll talk about him further here in just a minute, until his death in 1954. And he had a couple of proteges working at Manchester, a guy named Donald Mitchie and a guy named Jack Good. And so these are both people that work for Turing. At Turing at Bletchley, and they continue, and we'll find out that Turing's thing is machine intelligence. He's working on that, and so they continue his work after his death. Mitchie becomes the head of a machine intelligence and perception group at the University of Manchester, and the editor of a journal called Machine Intelligence. Good is on the faculty of Manchester and later Trinity College in Oxford. And so these guys from Bletchley basically go off and build the first stored program computer. Now, Alan, by the end of the war, was not at Bletchley anymore. He was at a place called Bletchley Park, and he was working on the encryption of speech. And so you recall that the Germans were working on that as well. And so they're working on advanced coding techniques for their own protection. In October of 1945, he basically goes to a place called the National Physical Lab in London, and his goal is to build a child machine or a self-learning AI machine. That's his objective after his learning from this time period. And so Turing brings in Tommy Flowers, you remember him, the guy that built Colossus, and two members of his team from the post office. And they begin work on a thing called the Automatic Computing Machine Engine, ACE. Now, ACE is slowed by Turing keeps changing the idea of how the machine's going to work. He just can't quite get the final design done. And Flowers is getting other jobs to do at the Doris Hill Lab, which is I would call Doris Hill kind of the equivalent of Bell Labs, is what I would call it. It's part of the post office over there, but it's kind of like Bell Labs. And so they canceled the program basically in March of 46. In September of 47, Turing went back to Cambridge and begins writing his paper, Intelligent Machinery, his first paper on that child machine. In May of 1948, he joins Max Newman at Manchester and continues his work in artificial intelligence. And in 1952, he's arrested for gross indecency, as you recall, and forced to take hormone treatments. And he commits suicide a couple of years later, on my birthday, by the way. Anyways, to conclude, fast forward to 1946. And so this is 1954. About 10 years later, Stanley Kubrick writes a letter to Arthur C. Clarke, a Brit, asking him to collaborate on a really good science fiction movie. Jack Good, Turing's protege, who's been writing these papers on artificial intelligence, wrote a paper in 1965 on speculations of the first ultra-intelligent machine. And Kubrick and Clarke are advised by Jack Good and Marvin Minsky. I think he's kind of famous for some of this type of work at MIT. And so they are the advisors for 2001, The Space Odyssey. And so HAL 9000 is born. And so out of World War II basically comes AI. And that's many years ago. So that's my talk. Any further questions?
Very cool. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, let's see. We got a couple of people.
Who is our friend with Samsung? SM-T7 on the screen. Or Talflanage. Yes, Tom, thank you.
We're just wondering where you're from. Are you
Yes.
from Delaware Bay or one of the other chapters?
Do we know the Samsung person? Who is the Samsung person?
I think that may have been the person who is having difficulty connecting before is now on their Samsung phone.
Got it,
Okay.
okay.
And they may not be able to respond.
Got
Okay.
it. And then
We're just curious who you are. Okay. Go ahead. He raised his hand, it says.
he raised his hand. Please go ahead and speak. Please unmute. I'm going to try to unmute. Can I unmute? I don't know if I can unmute.
Asked to unmute, it says.
Ask to unmute. Ask to unmute. I asked to unmute. But not helping. Sorry about that. There's a hand raised and we can't answer it.
Colf, could you give us a chat at least and let us know who you are?
Bill Stewart. Okay. Having
Oh,
issues.
Bill.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. So Bill Stewart is from the Delaware section, Delaware chapter.
Yeah, I know Bill.
Okay. Yes, the dreaded computer problem. Connectivity problem.
Well,
Okay, can you hear me
so
now?
Yeah.
Hey,
Excellent.
Oh, welcome, Bill.
hey, thank you, thank you. Hey, hi, Doug.
hi.
Well,
Yeah,
I hope
definitely.
you enjoyed the talk.
Yes, I did. I'm not sure what book you're referencing, but I read a number of books on the same topic, so maybe it was the same book. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is the first one that I had heard about this second cipher machine. You know, Enigma got lots of press, but
Yeah,
the other cipher machine you didn't hear about too much, and then you really didn't hear a whole lot about Colossus. You know, all the details of
yeah.
that until now.
Hmm.
So I had concluded, you know, the Americans were ahead, and I was wrong. But what you'll have to do is, if you go back to my talk, you know, I mentioned my talk on UNIVAC and its founding. What you'll find out is that, you know, that basically after World War II, the Navy code breaking operation basically was spun out into a private company called ERA Associates. And that was placed in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so ERA Associates was basically both a commercial company and a top secret code breaking operation in the same building. And so that's basically the founding of UNIVAC. It turns out that ERA gets bought by Remington Rand. Remington Rand had previously bought Eckert and Mockley computer, which had the ENAC. And so they end up turning ENAC into UNIVAC 1. And then ERA designs a thing called Atlas, and that becomes the 1101. And then they design another one called Atlas 2 that becomes 1103 commercially. And so these are all stored program code breaking machines designed by UNIVAC and ERA. And the surprising little item in this whole talk is that the head of the code breaking operation basically you know, when I said that the British merged their Army and Navy code breaking, the Americans merged the Army and Navy into a thing called, I can't remember, it's called the Armed Forces Security Agency. The next year it became NSA. And so the UNIVAC operation in St. Paul was run by the Navy and NSA. And this is all significant to me because the place that I went to work for UNIVAC in 1972 was a place called Plant 5. It was physically right across the street, right actually an alley from Plant 2 where ERA was located. And so, you know, I knew none of this, of course, in 1972. But you know, my whole talk is about how come UNIVAC became the owner of the Navy standard computer business. In other words, they were the leader in that for all the time that I was there. And what we learned, of course, is that because of the code breaking activity, they were in like Flint, okay, with the Navy. You know, Navy basically went to them first choice. The two major computer companies back in those times was IBM and UNIVAC. And so IBM typically owned the Air Force. Anyways, that's just a little side story on my other talk.
So it's very interesting also to see how, like, pre-war, leading up to the war, in between the wars, after the wars, where these companies were located, who worked for them, where, you know, like, even like how they managed to get the British involved with the Canadians who came to the United States to try to kind of bootstrap a system here in the United States, even before, while we were still isolationist and before we even got involved with the war, just to kind of lay the groundwork so that we could have some semblance of a code cracking and communication, intelligence kind of system going on, you know?
Yeah, I kind of think that our focus was more on the Japanese code. In my talk, you know, on UNIVAC, we talk about a thing called the Purple machine, which is the code breaking equivalent of the Bombay, but for the Japanese program. And so I suspect early on we were more focused on the Japanese than the Germans, and later on we get more serious. But as you saw, that, you know, we were working on the enhanced Bombay in like late 42, so long before we're fully in the war, I think.
Yeah, but I think we also had to be ready for long distance satellite communication too. So a lot of that really was part of the planning for how we would deal with some kind of global turmoil, right? That
Could be. We were talking about Tesla early on, and how Tesla dies in 1943, and the FBI appropriate the contents of his safe. So we're just wondering what he was working on during World War II.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people had to work on secret stuff because they were the people who knew everything and they needed to help people solve important problems back in those days, right?
You would think that he would be considered an expert advisor. You know, I
Yeah.
don't know what he would be doing exactly, but
Tom, what do you think? What do you think he might have been doing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, anyone could speculate on that, but I did really appreciate your talk, David. I really find these sort of, you know, World War II code breaking things kind of fascinating. I played a very minor role in preserving a chunk of the ENIAC computer when I was at the University of Michigan. There was a gentleman named Arthur Burks, who was a University of Michigan PhD graduate in mathematics and physics, who went on to the University of Pennsylvania and worked on the ENIAC machine. And at some point after the program was over, he somehow, and I don't know why he did this or you know what time frame this happened, but at some point there were 5 bays of the ENIAC got shipped up from the University of Pennsylvania back up to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And I don't know what they were really doing with it when they sent it up there, but ultimately it ended up in the junk room at the University of Michigan Electrical Engineering College. And as a graduate student in the 1980s in electrical engineering up in Ann Arbor, I had access to that room, and I found it a fascinating collection of old junk. And I would go in there and look at stuff, or sometimes look for components if I needed them in there, and so forth. And one of the professors mentioned that these bays of equipment were from the ENIAC. And I took a close look at it, and sure enough, the equipment all was of that vintage, 1940s era vacuum tube sort of technology, and it was just kind of sitting back there. And then at some point, someone said, we got to get rid of all this junk in this room back here. Let's toss all this stuff in the dumpster. And at that point, I went and spoke to the department secretary, who I knew quite well. Her name was Dawn, and I said, I don't really think we should throw those bays of the ENIAC out. I think, I think they might have some historical importance. Maybe we shouldn't just toss those in the dumpster. And she then went and talked to like the dean of the department or whatever. And then they realized, oh yeah, this stuff, we really shouldn't toss this stuff out. And now it's kind of on prominent display in the electrical and computer science engineering building at Michigan. So, And in fact, if you look at my LinkedIn page, I'm kind of standing in front of a whole rack of vacuum tubes, which are basically from those bays of the ENIAC. Now, most of the ENIAC computer did go to the Smithsonian, and it has been on display down there as well. But there are 5 bays of it up on campus at the University of Michigan. If you're ever in Ann Arbor, you can take a look at it. It's kind of cool to see. And they have I think they got Professor Burks back to, sign a vacuum tube, and it's kind of sort of on display in front of it. Kind of an interesting piece of history there. Anyhow, yeah, I find all this stuff really kind of interesting. So I really appreciated your talk, David.
The other talk that I do on UNIVAC goes over, there's like 4 or 5 other computers that are being developed at the time. And so there's really a race. I mean, it's like not entirely clear who was the first stored program computer. ERA claims to be the first. A guy named Maurice Weeks of England claims to be first in 1948. And then we just saw Colossus, the Manchester Baby coming out in 48. And so there's just a lot of people developing this stuff right around that time frame. So that all is just very interesting to me. And of course, see, I'm more into the components. And so what I do is follow things like the development of that electrostatic storage tube, the first RAM. It turns out that ENIAC developed a thing called the Mercury delay line. So that was their their program memory. ERA developed the first drum memory. So it was a rotating drum, magnetic drum. So the prior art to the rotating disc, basically. And that was all done in about 1945 or 46. And then notably MIT, Jay Forrester develops the core memory back in that time frame for a program called Whirlwind. And so there's all these different components get developed.
There were some very ingenious vacuum tube technology to make all that stuff work. I mean, really exotic kind of ideas and stuff like the Mercury tube you're talking about. Yeah, stuff you would, you wonder how they thought of this stuff. It's just so unique. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were they looking for something with a certain physical property when they would use the mercury, or?
Well, I mean, this is before transistors, right? I mean, and so, everything you're doing is, beams of electrons in vacuums controlled by grids and stuff. I mean, it's all, and they had there are all sorts of these very exotic and bizarre vacuum tube technology. I mean, it's not conventional vacuum tubes. It's, twists upon the physics, a lot of physics involved in those things.
Yeah, what I was going to do, if I can find it here, if you hang on the line a little bit, I'm going to show you the beauty of what was going on in 1954. They did some very advanced stuff back in these early days. But I've got to find my other paper here. It's going to take me a minute.
So also, Arthur C. Clarke was a friend with John Pierce, who was the president of Bell Labs at the same time that the 2001: A Space Odyssey was being born. And so they came to Bell Labs, right, Tom? Are you familiar with the speech part of that technology, Tom? Oh, somebody disappeared. Who was it? I don't know.
Maybe Tom.
Maybe no. Here he is. He's still there, but he's on.
Yes,
there you are.
yeah, sorry, I was talking to mute. I was just going to say that, yeah, Pierce was a big executive at Bell Labs, and was also a science fiction writer, and was friends with Arthur Clarke. And at AT&T, Pierce was really sort of the driving force behind the Telstar, right? I mean, so he was really
And a
big
lot of,
in a lot of important things that happened at Bell Labs back in the 50s and 60s.
he brought Rudy Kampfner over to work on that traveling wave guide, right, Tom?
Well,
I
the
mean,
traveling wave tube, yeah.
wave tube, yes. And and he wrote under the pseudonym of J.J. Coupling. So he wrote some stories about satellites and other famous and popular stories. Bill, you're smirking. You know the stories, right? You're on mute. You have to unmute. You have to unmute.
Yeah, I've read some of his there science fiction books from that time frame. I recognize the name.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was the boss in charge of Bell Labs for a long time, the driving force, you know. To have an imagination like that and creativity and then be able to like have influence over a company like Bell Labs that was aligned with an industry like, you know, AT&T was at the time, right?
Amazing.
It is. And they did work with government and industry to do things that were both, right? So they had NASA work and yeah. It was very cool.
Let me show you something if you can hang in there for a second here. Let
That'd be
me,
great. Would be wonderful. Yeah.
this is from my second talk. See if I can get it up here on the big screen. Anyway, so here's what UNIVAC was doing in 1953, the first avionics computer. And so you can see that this report was issued in 56. So they designed a miniature tube type computer for avionics applications called the UNIVAC 2052. It's a fire control computer for a B-24 bomber that automatically controlled the rear gun. And so it's a 20-bit instruction and data. It had a D to A and A to D sampling IO at 20 cycles per second and 15 IO channels. And so here is a picture of this thing. And so you can kind of see how they built this thing here a little bit. Let's go in here and blow it up a little bit. So you can see that they got all these little modules here on the outside that have miniature tubes on them. So here's all the logic of the computer over here on one side. Here at the end is the core memory. And so they built the core memory in a bunch of these little modules. So here's the core memory module that basically has some cores on a little teeny bitty PC board. And here's the tube logic. And so there's a tube board that goes into that computer. And so let's go down here a little bit further. Well, okay, so then the other thing that you'll see over here, if we blow in a little bit closer to this, you'll note here's the core memory at the end, but over here is the drum memory. So here is the magnetic drum that stored the data of this avionics computer in 1952 or 53. And there's what a magnetic drum storage for an avionics computer looked like in 1953. So you can see all the heads arrayed around the outside of the drum, you know, picking up the information off of the magnetic drum. Anyways, don't know if you found that interesting, but I did.
Okay.
I'm kind of a hardware guy. And of course, I go into that's what I do is I basically go into the detail of the hardware of all of the UNIVAC computers over time, over in those two talks. But Jim, thank you if you've already gone, but thank you for attending.
Is he gone?
Yeah, he left at 14, so 6 minutes ago.
Got it. Okay.
I'm trying to get him to do a talk like this up in the Twin Cities.
Oh, that'd be great.
That's why I was working with him. Now, it turns out that they are somewhat active, but sound like they could use a little help promoting you know, you got to get the right program to get people to show up.
So Doug and Bill, and Cole Flange is the voice or another part of one of the two of you, is that right? Or is that another person?
No,
That's
but
another
so Bill,
person.
you can see Bill now. He's got a video going.
Yeah,
Yes, I can see Bill, but I don't know who this other person is. Do we know who that other person is?
I think he went away.
He went away.
Or no, I guess.
Oh, Cole Flange.
Oh, Lange. I don't know if we know who Colf is.
I don't know.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Anyways.
yeah, so it would be really nice if we could like plan like one or two, maybe two meetings between now, or maybe three. What do you think, David, between now and the end of the year that we can co-host with your chapter and try to aim toward appealing to the people that you know that might want to join, and then like bring some
Well,
co-host.
let's tell Bill what we're talking about, because he wasn't here on the earlier discussion.
Ah,
Well,
gotcha.
what this was all about was trying to get Delaware Bay's Computer Society chapter active again.
Oh, great, yes.
So we basically wanted to call a meeting to get at least a couple of you to show up, which you did. But now the question is, how do we make it into, you know, how do you get your chapter active again? It's, you know, the reason that all this is happening now is that it's been active for 4 years, inactive for 4 years. And the way the IEEE works is after 4 years, if you're not active, they just cancel the chapter. It gets
Okay,
dissolved. And so now is appropriate time. If we want it to continue to be around, we would need to get at least 2 activities between now and the, you know, actually really now and the next few weeks. Here's the deal. In October, the MGA basically picks the chapters that are going to be dissolved, sends them to the board meeting of the IEEE in November. And so the way you prevent that from happening is either have some activities or promise to have some activities. And so, you know, we can convince them to, you know, keep the chapter around, but we would have to work that through the director, if you will, of Region 2, your region. We
Okay.
can't, problem, we can't identify a chapter chair. Doug, do you know if there's a chapter chair in place, or is it?
Well, at one time, I know Bill was considering it, but that's been a few years ago. You
Yeah.
remember that, Bill? Okay, so
not really.
okay.
I've had, I was ill for the last 4 years.
Can we
Okay.
elect you on this meeting right now?
Well, what you heard is both of these guys have had senior positions in the Delaware Bay section and in the chapter over
Mhm.
time.
Well, I don't know if I ever had a seat. I don't know if I ever had a position. It never got, I know there was a discussion, but the meeting I went to, they totally ignored that entire topic and spoke with everyone else. So I never knew the disposition of
Okay.
my participation in the region.
So, are the two of you willing to volunteer as officers from this point forward? If we can add you to V-Tools and make you two officers of your chapter, so we could keep it alive and try to help you revitalize the chapter between now and the end of the year? What do you think?
Well, here's something. I need to check with the current chairman of the Delaware Bay section,
Right.
because the section itself is having a problem. It's not just the computer society part, and see what's going on with him, because we've not had a section meeting in quite a while.
Who is it? Do you know
Yeah.
who the section chair is?
It's Charlie Bonsalot,
Oh,
B-O-N. Do you know that name, David?
No.
Oh,
How do you
okay.
Well, in fact, I pulled up a roster of
Okay.
Delaware Bay, which I think I sent to you, Kit. that there's, but if not, I can find it. But
Okay.
basically, there are officers listed.
Mhm.
And so what we may not be able to do is get a hold of them, okay?
Right.
Well,
Not answer their emails but what we actually
Um,
have is phone numbers and emails for the
Mhm.
officers that are listed. And so that would in fact be the appropriate approach. What we kind of like to do is get one more event under our belt. Now, that would not require necessarily a chapter chair in place. We would just need to do another one of these events and try to get a few more members to show up. That's the trick, okay, is we need to, get a whole group, not just one or two, you probably don't feel like you don't know whether it'll go or not, right? At this point.
I think it's possible that the chairman, they have a distinguished lecturer series at University of Delaware,
Yeah.
and the section supports that partially. And so I've been to a couple of those meetings, but it's a lecture series, which is basically what our meetings have always been. And
That
I'm not,
distinguished lecture, is that, are you meaning a computer society distinguished visitor? Or
well, they at the University of Delaware, the name I know what you're saying.
yeah,
What they call it is a distinguished lecturer. And so they have people in from all kinds of places, but the
Yeah.
topics are quite frequently computer related. And so I'm not sure what the chair, Charles Boncelet, is currently the chairman. I guess you see that name, Boncelot, I believe is the way you spell his last name.
Yeah, let me
He used
go
to be
look
the
at
chair of the engineering department of U of D. Was he
Uh,
not?
no, you're at the time that we were having meetings, is that what you're referring to, Bill?
Yeah, I thought Charlie Bonsett, he was either a dean or like professor or something in
Well, yeah,
engineering.
Yeah,
yes,
he's professor, and his email is universitydelaware.edu.
right.
Mhm.
He's a electrical engineering professor,
Yeah.
So
and
you don't have a vice chair at this point.
right.
You have, let's see what else you got here. I've got the whole list here.
Well, we have a
pastor named Joseph Burns. You have a secretary named Ryan Patterson. You have a treasurer named Julian Walcott. No, take it back. These are all South New Jersey. So,
oh yeah, I was
what?
gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
sorry.
recognize any name there.
No, the secretary is a guy named Donald Deadsey.
Oh yeah,
Of course, Doug, you're the called Sam EEE recipient for Delaware Bay, and you're
Yeah.
listed as the newsletter editor. And
Yeah,
you're also
okay.
listed as the awards and recognition chair.
Yeah, webmaster. I've been doing what's done on that.
Yeah. Anyway, so it looks
Um,
like there's just a couple of other potential officers we could talk to. You got a student activities chair, Austin Brockmeyer,
Right, yep,
and then Michael McCain is the
is
treasurer.
the treasurer, yes.
So, and they're doctors, so they're probably at the university, I'm betting.
Mike McCann is not, but
Oh, he isn't.
the others are, yes.
Okay,
Okay, Dresdy is, he's not been active, but he is listed.
okay,
He works at Aberdeen Proving Grounds
okay,
as a contractor there on that site.
yeah. Well, I know all about this. I'm the section chair of Pikes Peak out here in Colorado. And so, we hired a secretary in January and he hasn't shown up for the job yet.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I'm trying to get a new treasurer and I'm having a hard time with that too. And so, these kind of problems are not unique to one area. They're all over the place.
So one of the things I'd
Mhm.
like to do as the area, chapters coordinator is to try to plan some good activities that will appeal to people in the different chapters. If you help me figure out what your interest might be, I can try to help kind of seed those activities. So you will
Mhm.
have at least some activities that people might want to attend. If you feel at the moment, you feel like most of the people in your section are attending the Delaware activities, the University of Delaware activities, right? Is that what you think is happening?
That's happening. I'm not sure. So Charlie has to keep track of how the activities are listed um, in the V tools list of activities, and I'm not sure how he's doing that. I guess that's what I'm saying. You're saying there's no activities listed, and I was not aware of that.
I haven't received any communications in 4 years until this invite.
Yep, so that's why we're here, and what I'm doing right at the moment is I'm looking up Delaware Bay in Region 2 on the MGA website, and we're gonna go, I'll tell you when the last event was. That's what I'm
I
gonna
have
do.
not, I've tried to reach out to the region director and they don't respond to me either. So it's like a silent key there over in region.
Well, what it looks like to me is the section doesn't exist.
No, I
For
mean the region doesn't respond.
Well, that too, but when I go to Delaware Bay section, no, I guess
Mhm.
take it back. It doesn't show up as a separate organizational unit. So I'm going to go do search on Delaware Bay. So I got a lot of activity back in 2010, but there's only been 68 activities since 2010, and the last one listed here was, well, actually February.
Yeah.
There was a
We,
dinner in February, and there's another meeting, an XCOM meeting in February, and but then you go back to 23, you got two meetings last year, two XCOM meetings last year, and you get then you
So
go back.
that's the minimum number of meetings, right, David, is 2 meetings?
Yeah, that would be the bare minimum requirement for a section. I think maybe it's 5 actually.
Yeah, it
So
might be.
they would probably be on probation. So what I'm gonna do now is look at the C16 chapter and say, what was the most recent activity there? And you're probably right, it's not been recently. It's see, we'll see here. It says, well, it says, this meeting, I guess, is the one this year, and the last one was in 22. And then there's one in 21. What that suggests to me is that you're really not, well, the question is, why is it? I've got, what I don't know at this point is whether you recorded them. So that's what I'm
yeah,
gonna find. They gotta be recorded for you to get credit.
that's true.
And so let me see that. The answer is, well, I don't claim that you're in dissolution, is what I would say, based on my data here. What I'm seeing is 2 meetings in 21, 1 meeting in 22, and nothing in 23, and then this meeting in 24. So that, so in 23, you didn't have any activity, so you're on probation, but you're not dissolved. That's what
So
I'm,
there's time to pull it out of the fire, right?
yeah, so what that tells me is there are issues at the section level, but it's not fatal. And that the chat computer society doesn't appear to be, I got to go look at my records because I would have sworn I keep saying that you're in dissolution, and I'm seeing recorded meetings here.
I think the way the reports come out, it comes from a different system than when we look online and look at the system, or are you
Well, I
looking?
mean, you know, my guy, Chris Gunning, who generates the report, of
Mhm.
course, look into this further for us. I mean, if we have errors. But I'm questioning what, oh, let's see, now the question is. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I'll look into it further. So, you know, but basically, conclusion is you're kind of still around, but not very active.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
Earlier this-
that's where we started.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, what Kit can do, see, one of the things we've been doing is we have these series, it's like a fall series of about 6 or 8 Computer Society seminars. And we're almost to the end of that. I think we have 2 more, one tomorrow night and one later, you know, in another week. And so, you know, we potentially can get you co-hosted in the one in a week, and it goes out to all your members. I mean, you don't have to have a chapter chair to do that. We can just get, you know, more people to show up. But the ultimate goal is to have another one of these meetings where we try to encourage a few more of your members.
So what's going on now? Like last year, I was able to send out e-notices to everyone in Region 1 because I was a Region 1 webinar person, but that people became a little bit hysterical over getting the notion that there might have been too many e-notices going out, you know. We did have a lot of lively activities. We had like 300 people show up to meetings and 350 and stuff like this, which was really great because the speaker gets an audience and people see each other and it brings life back, vitality back. But I didn't include Region 2 all the time in those meetings. And now we have to, the chapters have to self-select. They have to kind of subscribe now and let us know that we have permission to send them an e-notice. But right now there's nobody in charge. So David and I are hoping to just send out some e-notices to try to attract people to come back, you know, to Computer Society and engage in the activities.
Well, that's what I would propose, is just let's, you know, work with Doug and Bill and maybe call one more meeting. But we got to figure out what would attract more members, you know.
Right.
Um,
The
because
one tomorrow would have been great, but it's a little bit late notice for tomorrow, right?
I think so, yeah. It's
Yeah.
I know a person that won't want to hear that.
What meeting is going on tomorrow?
Well, I
I'm not
can,
aware of that.
so
Um,
Al Sprintoff is talking about, go ahead, David, you say it so better than I do.
oh, okay. So Al Sputnoff is the region 3 and 4 coordinator, just like Kit is 1 and 2. And so he's going to be speaking tomorrow night. What he is an expert in computational DNA. In other words,
Cool.
he worked with supercomputers and DNA analysis, and he worked for the FDA. And so he's going to tell you the story, you know, his life story, but it's he'll tell you a story about tracking a salmonella outbreak in Minnesota to a supply chain in San Diego by the signature of the salmonella virus, you know, whatever it is, virus or bacteria or whatever, but they're
And
analyzing that stuff.
one of the other programs he worked on was identifying remains from previous military action.
Yeah, like Vietnam era MIAs and things like that. He's working with the government on that because he lives in Omaha, so he's near Offutt Air Force Base, for example. And so he's kind of an interesting guy, and he's of course you know, one of my organization, and so that's why we like him. But I'm sure you'd find that interesting. In fact, we can get the link,
I mean,
the Zoom
we
link.
don't need, yeah, we don't need to get Michael, you know.
You don't have to co-host. You just send
No,
us.
I mean, I can just send the e-notices to their chapter if the system will allow me to do
Well,
it.
if you want to do that, you can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll get there tomorrow.
Okay.
You might get a few people, so you could just send
Yeah.
it to the group.
Yeah, if that's all right with, I mean, you guys don't have any objection to that, do you?
No,
I
Okay,
have
good.
no authority.
Either they'll ignore it or they won't, okay?
Right,
I
Well,
will
Yeah.
read it, maybe it'll show up.
I got this notice.
good.
Well, yeah,
Well,
so
I'm,
clear it
Yeah, and I
works.
did too, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. That was
Uh,
good.
This is not unusual, to struggle with getting, dozens of people to show up for a meeting. It's just really hard.
The other thing that I do is I keep an eye on the Computer Society website where they have a calendar that shows all the upcoming meetings. And I find out if somebody who's running an upcoming meeting is running something that looks like it's in the right time frame, if it's an interesting topic, and then I reach out to them and I ask them if they mind if we co-host, and then I engage that way. And try to bring those meetings again to elevate visibility to the speakers and to the topics, but also to bring people out again to get people excited about IEEE Computer Society, because as you pointed out, it is the largest society, and we think it's the gateway to STEM, right? I think in the past it was a decision whether you wanted to be a STEM person or not. Now you really don't have a choice. STEM is the real world, right? And computer society is our gateway to that STEM, I think, so I think even though many of us want to spend a lot of time down in very important topics, very significant topics, it's an approachable topic. Computer society topics are approachable, so yeah.
I get a notice from, and I'd have to look, I don't remember her name. She sends out a notice on all the upcoming webinars.
Is that Michelle Tubb?
I don't remember the name. I'm not, but I just know that she lists all the upcoming webinars plus the webinars that are now available for review, that have been held in the past. And this was included in that list, so that's how I picked up on it.
Okay.
Very cool. If you could tell me about that person, I'd really love to to learn.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll look it up.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it could be somebody in your section, or it could be somebody in
No, I
the
don't.
region. Could be somebody in the region, maybe.
It's somebody at IEEE headquarters that's in charge of media or something to that effect.
Okay, well, it could be the Computer Society.
I
marketing
think
department.
it's other departments, so it's not just the computer.
Okay, so it might be IEEE in general. Okay.
Yeah, it's IEEE. So a couple of topics that I've been on Charlie to organize that he has promised, but nothing's happened yet. And one is to explain quantum computing, the basic physics of that. Okay. I have not seen an article anywhere that explains exactly what they're doing in quantum computing. I've seen all kinds of articles on how fantastic it's going to be if they can get that going. But okay. And the other one is cryptocurrency. I know there's been a basic original paper, but then there have been some papers after that, and it'd be interesting to me to understand what the basic thought is on cryptocurrency and why it works. There've been some articles in basically I can understand IEEE spectrum pretty well, but I get lost in some of the journals from
We might be able to work on that one. Of course, crypto is based upon blockchain. Is this tech called blockchain.
There've been a couple of articles in a computer magazine and also I think in Spectrum on how cryptocurrency is not quite as secure as you think, and ways to overcome it.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to wonder what's the basis of it?
Sure.
So,
Well, my understanding on it, I've been following Bitcoin since September 2009.
Yeah.
And the only rule in the last 20 years of my career was cybersecurity, architect, all of that uh, area in computers. And the only, it wasn't a real vulnerability, but in the blockchain, it really isn't unreadable. Anybody with the right tool, you can actually sort through and figure out anybody who owns any of the coins. Now you can't break it and get your account and overtake your account, specific to the Bitcoin thing.
Yeah.
So that is
Well-
why the government knows who owns Bitcoins. Then if you fessed up.
Well, just for example, I've read that you can fake cryptocurrency, but you got to be really fast. And that's why this one writer says that it works because the system that's running that particular Bitcoin is a lot faster than anybody can catch up with it.
Yeah. Well,
So
is it Bitcoin or is it cryptocurrency is a umbrella for a number of cryptocurrencies? Bitcoin is one, it's a brand name. There's Ethereum and there's hundreds of others.
Yeah, the basic
So-
idea though that this anyway, that's just an example of something that makes me wonder.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
have a researcher's name for the paper, the principal paper that you were talking about, that we can start to like? do some
There
digging?
is an original article proposing cryptocurrency and written some years ago actually. And
Yeah,
I'd have to look back and see. It was a Chinese sounding
Yeah.
guy, seems like.
If you can send it
sounds
to
like-
me, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
But they
sorry.
don't know who the original author is. That's hidden.
Not exactly, yeah. Well, they
So-
think
Really?
they think they know who it is, though.
Oh, but
Wait
I've
a
been
minute.
hearing that for 15 years.
Yeah. No, they do know who wrote the original paper, but they're not sure. I can't remember what it is they're not sure about.
Who actually developed it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he actually developed it. He wrote the original paper on how
Well-
you could do it. And then there were a couple more guys after that that actually put it into practice, is my understanding. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I have this understanding. I'm not sure it's correct.
Are you also a
But-
cryptographer, Doug?
Pardon me?
Are you
No,
also a cryptographer?
No, I'm not.
You know, I've been doing.
But Bill is a cryptographer, right, Bill?
I used to be.
You know, I've been in computers for 53 years now, and I don't still understand quantum computing. I know a fair bit about it. I've attended multiple seminars on that, but they don't really explain how quantum theory works. In other words, basically the best I can tell is a qubit is literally a diode.
Mhm.
Okay.
And a diode that you feed at 5 gigahertz a signal into, and you cool it to cryogenic temperatures, and it has a nonlinear characteristic. But how that turns into adding a matrix and doing a matrix multiplication on, I mean, so a qubit, I mean, quantum arithmetic is not binary. It's basically, n-valued numbers. That's what I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
I don't even.
And you got to keep the whole thing stable. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, making it work. And so then there's this thing called you got to have error correction to actually make quantum processes work, because there's enough noise in the system.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Doug, what is your field? What is your area of computer science?
Just practice and industrial automation, basically. So
Can you tell what kind of
Systems, mostly
industry would be
control
in?
systems, Doug? Or, I'm sorry. Control systems or signal processing or robotics?
I guess what I've been involved in is special machinery that uses automation. So Um, so I've written software, as needed, but not specialized in it.
Hmm.
Sorry, David, I didn't mean to step on you. I was just having trouble
No,
processing.
I was gonna ask, we heard that the University of Delaware, is a big hotbed of the academic side. What's the industry, what would you say would be the primary, computer related industry
Well,
in
that
Delaware, or is it all just general application of computers?
well, you hit the nut of the problem. That one time, the DuPont company was a big sponsor of electrical activity, but they've kind of left that. So we really don't have that. A lot of the people have gone to what's called ISA, which is now they changed what ISA stands for 2 or 3 times. I think it's let's see, instrument something. Anyway, there are into control machine controls.
Okay.
So another let's see, there've been some other industries like solar power and
You have a lot of government industry down there too, don't you? I mean, government,
not in Delaware.
in Delaware.
But yeah, there's a lot of Baltimore section has a lot of activity and of the type NSA. A lot of the people in that section are NSA people.
Fort Meade, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of activity in that section. Delaware had some, mainly due to the DuPont company. The DuPont company's kind of left it. And then the Philadelphia section has a lot of influence in Philadelphia, and the New Jersey section have a lot of aeronautic applications. So the University of Delaware is about it that I'm aware of, other than just simple machine automation.
So power, when you're talking about solar power, does the power society have a big chapter in?
Well, that was University of Delaware developed, and solar. At one point, there was a solar intelligence center in Delaware, but that's flown off to other parts of the country now. That's not an entity in Delaware.
Didn't DP&L at one point, a lot of the officers in our section were from Delmarva Power, and they did a lot sponsoring and having all kinds of presentations,
Well,
10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
And that kind of disappeared over time. And,
Yeah.
and they were also pushing some of the solar power, and that disappeared from DP&L.
mhm.
And
Well, the chairman prior to Bonsolet was oh darn, Steve Steffel, who was
Okay, yeah.
he was a big organizer of talks on the area, excuse me, of power
Just at
distribution.
DP&L.
Yeah, you
Steve
would think the
worked for
power society would
Delmarva.
be everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Delmarva Power,
Yeah.
but he's kind of retired also. So
Yeah.
he and I have been agitating to find somebody that hasn't been in that office for forever to lead the section, and we just haven't found anyone.
So according to Google AI, your top industry is financial services, banking,
Yep.
credit card, and health and medical insurance.
Probably patents too. A lot of people patent their stuff in Delaware, don't they? Or they incorporate in Delaware,
It's,
don't
it's
They
a corporate, it's a
incorporate.
corporate
Mm.
center, and they're slowly losing some of that. A lot of competition, but I was involved in uh, not much of the technology. I started programming 60 years ago. My brother got me into it, but uh, I didn't get a degree until 15 years later. And I was
Yeah.
25, so it gives you an idea how young I was. But I did a lot of design on computers in 70 to 80, and got into the personal computers, um, the big S100 phase starting in 75, designing that, but then selling and um, developing applications, actually creating a business. So I created a business here in Delaware. That's how I got here. It was um, angel investor funded, and uh, so I sold huge amount of computers in the tri-state areas over 18 years. But most of my technical activity was training and consulting, uh, even to the major manufacturers in uh, computer repair, actually what it took to keep the components working. And so I owned a couple business doing that with training people. So I never was in a quote traditional electrical engineer position as IEEE would define it.
Yeah.
I was in that area of using technology to create businesses and employ lots of people. And I've
Yeah.
done that over time. In the last 15 years, I spent in the financial world.
So can I ask
And
you
uh,
how has IEEE played a role in your life? Like what do you see as the value of IEEE and how do you see that like
how honest do you want me to be?
100%?
And I've struggled this with my entire life. 100% worthless. And this was before computers. The problem has always been communications. And so even when back in the 70s, the 80s, um, and I was a member of all kinds of things within IEEE, but um, communications, getting attention, trying to speak with people, it was very difficult because things that I did, I only had a bachelor's. And what I learned, if you didn't have a PhD, no one wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And and I'm been very successful. Uh, I've
Can
been
I share
tested.
something? Let me share a
Yeah,
secret with you. Even when
yes,
you have a PhD, nobody wants to talk to you.
yeah,
It's just, they're just going to use some excuse, whatever it is, because that's the way people
yeah,
are. So,
yeah. So I don't know what I've used IEEE for research papers and everything to read, try to keep up. Um, but what I found, I could get the same information without the paywall of IEEE. And now that has disappeared in the last 15 years, with the big growth of the internet. But
Yeah.
I was there in developing the retail computer industry, the internet on the retail side, uh, and training thousands and thousands of people to enter and mentoring to do all that. But
And do
anytime,
you still feel like doing things like that? Do you still want to mentor and guide other people and deal with lifelong learning and stuff like this?
I still
Yeah.
mentor.
Mhm.
I've had some challenges because the banking buildings I had were full of mold. And that almost took me out a couple of times. And it's the last time Doug, I was challenged the last 10 years, even at all the IEEE meetings I was at, because my short-term memory was under attack. But uh, my uh, I'm one of those people that kind of remember the good, the bad, and ugly from everything back to 2 years of age, and muscle memory going back to 1 year of age. And I've been tested so many times that um, I'm way off on the other end, but I didn't really want to. I never had the opportunity to go get other degrees, but
And
I taught myself.
it doesn't, I mean, like, I've been hearing, I've been beaten up a lot lately where people say, you people with your PhDs and you're all academic. I'm like, I worked in industry my entire life, like this is not, I'm not, but so like, I don't know, a lot of people don't want to talk to me. They're not discriminating against me because I don't have a PhD, because I have a PhD. So
Mhm.
I think, I think it's just like where you're sitting, the grass always looks greener,
Yeah.
And
No, it's actually not that. I understand that because I've been mentoring my entire life.
right,
So how I got how I got ahead
right,
is I purposely taught myself how to speak, how to interact with any person, doesn't matter how they're behaving or whatever, and
yep.
hide my comment about PhD. This is the first time I've ever told anybody
Thank you
in
for
a
telling me.
professional
Thank you.
area. That's why
Yeah, no, it's great.
I said, "You really want to
Tom and
know?"
Tom and I have
Um,
PhDs, and like everybody
yeah,
we know, right, Tom?
yeah,
Like it's just because we're awake 24 hours a day. We
yeah,
don't, a lot of us don't have
mhm,
children, family. We don't,
yeah,
this is our thing,
mhm,
so we do it.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but, but,
yeah.
I,
But I found
yeah,
that
yeah,
from working with a number of people at DuPont and other
right.
areas, most everybody assumes I have a PhD because I can keep up even in their area of expertise, and been known to, when people would belittle me, I could belittle them back in a presentation through answering questions. No one else knew that, but the person who was dismissing me realized he shouldn't do that because I could call him out that he's kind of
So,
in error of his
I didn't
presentation.
have that experience with DuPont when I interacted with them, and
Yeah,
I didn't have that experience at Bell Labs working there.
yeah,
People there really, I think we can turn this around a bit. We can like encourage people to help others to achieve their
yeah,
personal best, whatever that
yeah,
is,
yeah,
and to just be pleased and
mhm,
happy and delighted for
yeah,
whoever and wherever they are.
yeah.
That's,
Well, that is what I taught my entire life.
yes,
And so I never was belligerent. I didn't really care how I was treated. I just
yeah.
kind of noted it. And well, doctors are in the same way. Actually, it's in any area that has a lot of complexity, scientific complexity. And so it's not really engineering. It's a whole background and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
I got a
and it's
background in
also the way you handle.
biomedical, and yeah.
I mean, your
So
point is it's how you handle yourself, right? It's
yeah,
how you
that's
treat people.
100%. It's a
Yeah,
100% of the game.
yes.
It's um and hey, when
Well,
you're
I'm sorry you had that experience. Let's fix it. Let's fix it in
yeah,
Bo- in Delaware Bay. Let's make everybody
yeah,
happy to play and to jump back into the pool.
yeah,
You know, let's
yeah.
find
Well,
topics. I mean, when you
yeah,
started mentioning cryptography and quantum, that to me is something I would have to study in order to even understand how to approach the problem, right? So,
Yeah.
and
Well, I have I had the ability to scan graduate textbooks 3 or 4 times in 10 days, 2 weeks later, I could make a detailed presentation on whatever I read. And most people could not find my depth of understanding. I just had that capability. But the mold thing killed my my IO, you might want to say. So
right.
I can't.
I'm sort of like Dory the fish. So the next time we see each other, I might ask you if I know you. And please just, it's the short-term memory
Yeah.
thing you're describing, The
No.
fusiform gyrus over here
Mhm.
is having a little,
Yeah.
extra
Mhm.
trouble.
But the IEEE is very helpful in its standards area,
Yeah.
because I'd always present all of this to, especially in the banking world, because I'm an individual contributor. I refuse to accept any management position, and most of my career has been president or CEO at a $10+ million business, and my last 15 years, nah, I just want to be down in the pack. And but I would mentor everybody and teach them exactly how to use computers really efficiently, at least cost, at scale, within small banks like Bank of America or MBNA credit card that Bank of America bought.
Mhm.
And uh,
I was going to say, I think Bank of America is one of the larger banks, right? They bought Boatman's. I remember I was
yeah, well,
yeah,
every
they're big. Yeah,
they were buying 20 and $30 billion financial firms every other year.
right.
And uh, I be somehow I became arguably one of the top 5 technical people worldwide in every company I ever worked at, including
That's
Bank of America.
fantastic.
So
That's fantastic.
uh, I would design the computer architecture throughout the bank, and then the security architecture. I would mentor the IT executives who have tremendous in-depth technology of actually how to use your technologies to make it secure.
Mhm. So
And
I want to pose
so,
my second question to Doug.
yeah,
We'll come back to this. My second question I'm posing to Doug. If the world were your oyster, but you guys have crabs down. Do you have crabs down there? Or is that Maryland? Maryland has crabs, right?
we
Anyway,
got
Well,
crabs too.
both.
They're
Yeah.
all over.
if the world were your oyster, how would you redesign your experience with IEEE, the computer chapter? How would you one of the things I've been thinking about is this is a really powerful engine of industry from Maine all the way to Washington. This is region 1 and region 2 that are going to merge together, right? So we can sort of see ourselves as like a kind of a unit, region 1 and region 2. And how do we put ourselves back on the map and turn on the lights again, right? What do we want to do? How do we want to be? And some of the things I think we can do that I think you guys brought up that is important to me is to find like tutorial topics where if we do have a talk, the talk can then become part of a tutorial, which we then publish as a region, as a chapter, as a group. Because I mean, if you look at like Region 10, that's what they do. They have a lot of schools, they have a lot of professors there tell their students download the paper, use this paper for your classes and stuff. And then they go up in the explore.
That's nice.
Right. So I think if we think about this, some of the topics you mentioned are really good candidates for being part of a tutorial series that we would do, right? In
Yeah.
region 1, region 2. So
Well, when I was working for Bank of America,
mhm.
I would I bought a host of periodicals from IEEE privately, and many of those articles would have been very advantageous to disseminate, but the only way I could do that, I had to convince higher level executives within the bank that I should be on the distribution list of the IEEE membership that they already paid for to get
Right.
certain documents.
Right.
But I was too low level. So it was with internal problems within the bank, that, well, you're too low level, you wouldn't understand that. And
Okay.
yeah, so there's a very disconnection.
No, yeah, I mean, like, yeah,
And,
I think about in the early 1980s when I first got out of my master's in computer science, somewhere in that time frame. And I go into my job and they're telling us, about the layoff at some point, eventually. They're getting rid of the women first because the women haven't been in the workforce long enough. And oh, by the way, they have husbands who are going to support them. So, like, there's every kind of really crazy thing that people will tell you that I think, I'm really glad we have this little support group here.
yeah. Was this at DuPont?
No, that was
Oh,
at a
okay.
company owned by IBM, Sears, and
Oh,
CBS.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay. And,
yeah, yeah. But I mean, you could go to another company and they'll say the same thing.
yeah.
They'll come up
Oh,
with some
yeah.
ridiculous spin the wheel excuse
Mhm.
about why they're going to get rid of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had that. And I've had that.
Pardon me. What? Yeah.
I've experienced that, in a way, at DuPont on a uh, 8-hour interview that I went into, and it was some of the comments and things of how people react, bringing up like layoffs. So why are you bringing up layoffs in an interview?
And
Just,
and some people, they interview, they get the job, they move, and then they're told the job doesn't exist anymore, or something
yeah,
like that. No.
yeah, exactly.
So
It's
Tom is like I'm the left-handed twin, and Tom is the right-handed twin. Tom is
gotcha.
the quiet, mild-mannered Midwesterner. I'm the Brooklyn girl who can't like take it. I can't take another minute of crazy, and so I listen to what you say. I take it seriously.
Yeah.
I integrate it into my schema, and then I try to do something to improve people's experience. So I'm hoping that we can come up with some good plans, that everyone here will like. Does that make sense?
Yes, I've one of the big positive things about the IEEE and its website, it took them until maybe 2015 or 2016 and this was really the Computer Society, to finally get their act together and start making the website do what they think it's going to do and what you're taught to do.
I
Prior
still
to
have
that,
trouble. There's too many nested menus, and you have to guess what they mean by
yes,
these things.
yes,
You
yeah,
have to read
that
the
is,
mind of the developer to figure it out. You have to read the mind of like who had the right budget. Did somebody decide they're going
yeah.
to put this here because so many people found that spot, so now they think it's a popular spot and they put it at the top, but the fact is the other one is the one you were looking for and it's never going to get to the top because they're just taking the one everyone found.
Well, my view on what you just said
Yeah.
is, and I've shared this with many companies at many conferences and stuff, is that each company tries to put it in the vocabulary of their the majority, whatever that company does.
The
And
industry.
we're electrical engineers, so we try to put the vocabulary and technical, and
Okay. Now,
they
yeah.
don't use simple English language to describe what they want to do. And that really, I believe, is most of IEEE's root problem,
Right.
is they don't simplify
And yet
the
there's
language.
some cases when it doesn't want to be simplified, like you asked about the physics of of quantum computing, right? You guys asked about
But you
that.
wouldn't, but you wouldn't. See, it's understanding.
Yeah.
You're talking about a specific topic now.
Right.
Previously, we were using examples of
about the
talking
web page.
about
Yeah.
menus and weaving
Right.
through. So the
Yep.
structure of how the web, I used to audit um, uh, websites for many companies, and I would
Yep.
tell them what's going on. I says, the developer knows what it's going to do, so they assume the user knows why you should click on this button or this link.
Correct.
And so the people developing at IEEE, some of them, the developers do the same thing. They it's so complex, very complex to do all of this, and they forget the person using it. This may be the first time they can't decipher what you're meaning because you're assuming they have prior knowledge.
Correct. Yeah.
And that is probably the biggest problem I see on any website. Doesn't matter who
So
it
this
is.
is part of the communication issue you're talking about?
Yeah, this is specifically a communication issue. It's
Okay.
it's another thing of mentoring people is
And
in mentoring, one of the biggest things is you want to empathize, you say something, you want to repeat it back to let the person know you heard them. And then you can add on what you wanted to say.
Eliza, remember Eliza?
Eliza, I remember Eliza, yes.
The
But
Rogerian therapy, yes. Yeah. We need that again. We need it back on our
yes,
website. You're right. You're absolutely right. So now we've got down. So what did you think that the Computer Society does well on their site? You were saying that they did some things well. What do they do?
well, I think well, it's fast, and of late when I've gone out and looked, and it's been a while,
Mhm.
because of the illness I've had. It's let's put it this way: my short-term memory was so bad, I couldn't even I couldn't even dial in, and much less I could not have a conversation with you because it would take 5 seconds for me to formulate and understand one word you said, and then another 5 seconds for me to recall the appropriate word to help describe it, and another 5 seconds to figure out how to speak the word. I mean, that's how incoherent I was. So,
I'm really glad.
but
I'm really glad you're back to being yourself.
yeah, but looking through that experience
Mhm.
shows me all the small little steps that people take in their communication. It's made me a better mentor. And I'm still mentoring some people from University of Delaware through their Kern entrepreneurship organization, and they self-selected me then, and they said, "Hey, I graduated. I still want you to be my life mentor." So now they're 27 years of age, and but it comes down to communication and understanding the meaning of the words that you're saying.
Yep.
And in most websites, once they get underneath one menu, they make an assumption that the operator already knows. And this is pretty broad across the industry. It doesn't, but IEEE has been cleaning that up every year for the last 5 to 8 years. I really like that.
That's
Um,
great.
but it seems like they went to the V tools. Well, I go to the home page and I click on things, and they still go to nowhere. What do you want to do? And you
Right.
get into a loop of, if you don't know where to go, you can't get to where you want to go.
Yep.
And some of those are still dead ends referencing things that they changed 5 years ago.
Yep,
They're never coming back.
right.
Like your V tools should be closer to the surface, because that seems to become a central area to how to communicate. And I've gone and searched for various meetings or notices like the previous speaker did, and I recognize the year dates, and I'm going, yeah, I saw two of them back then, another one in 23. So, but I hadn't seen any prior. But starting to use the V tools seems to be a 5 or 8 year migration. And not everything gets into it. And it really, I believe it was different interest areas, like even within computer society, it might be a different specialty within computers, i.e. quantum computers versus general purpose
Well, you know,
versus
what they're
control
doing
systems.
now that I like, they have these, you know, like last year, the president of IEEE created that Climate Action Explore webpage, right? Where
Mhm.
it's not based on a silo of a particular technical society or council. It's
Yeah,
based on the topic of interest that draws from all the different areas and
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah. I
and
love
you can,
information like that. Yes, that
yeah.
is great.
And you can relabel it if we only had the feasibility of doing that, going back and relabeling keywords so we could use that to help search, you
Yeah,
know? And
yeah.
so that
Hey,
would be great.
hey, Kit, I gotta
Yeah.
go. I
All
just
right.
want to, yeah, it's nice to meet both Bill and Don. And I guess we didn't meet the other guy, Kolf, but nice for you to be there as well. And we'll stay in touch. You know, I think Kit's on top of your information, and I just sent you the roster of both South Jersey and Delaware, Kit.
Oh, thank you so much. And what I'll do is
So I mean, we could call the section chair and try to reach him.
yeah, can you send me the phone number? And I'll do that
It's in that database I sent
it's
you.
in that. Okay, great. And the other
Okay.
thing is I'll send you folks, everybody tonight when I get it, or tomorrow if I'm too sleepy, because I should not send email when I'm really tired. David can tell you, last night I sent out how many crazy emails in the middle of the night? Well, really, I should have been watching, I don't know, a Netflix thing or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I might send the wrong link. I might send it to the wrong person. Sometimes people are
Well,
angry
yeah,
with
send it
me.
out. I
You
think
know.
it might be interesting to
Yeah.
Delaware Bay. And, you know, what I found was there's a bunch of biotech companies uh, in the area. That was
So
one
my
of,
PhD is in biomedical engineering, so I absolutely love the fact that you
Mm.
guys have some biotech in your area because it would be really cool. And Tom has he's Tom human safety, right? In electromagnetic compatibility and human safety, right? Tom? Maybe he's
anyway,
driving.
I'm going to go. We'll see
All
y'all.
right. Thank you,
Bye.
David. Thank you so much.
Nice
And
meeting you,
we'll,
David. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay,
Well,
I'm gonna have to go also.
all right.
I
So
will check, I will check with the chair also
thank
and
you.
nudge him on these two topics that one funny thing about Delaware is that the university has never been active, played an active role in the professional society, which is kind of weird. And so we've tried to get them, but they seem to be a whole bunch of Lone Rangers operating,
Yeah.
and they don't really like to be organized. And so they're members of the national IEEE, and I think are well known at the national level, but they're not the least bit interested in the local level.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
I mean,
something.
I think that to Bill's point about V-tools, the OU analytics, and Doug, you're the SAMI person, right? So just being able to look at SAMI and see who's registered as a volunteer, those people are volunteers all over the place. They could be volunteers in a technical society or a council or any other thing. They don't necessarily have to be a volunteer in this chapter or the section to wind up designated as a volunteer in SAMI. in OU Analytics. You'll see that you can find a report on volunteers and sort of get an idea how they are connected to the things they're doing, right? Like what organization they volunteer with, for example. I think is in that report, isn't it? Or at least you'll see the word volunteer, so there somebody knows about them. And they do have a profile that says what things they volunteered for, what boards they might be on, or what.
Well, they feel that their career and life is more directed to national activities,
Yeah,
and they don't the people that well, let's see, I can't think of actually one that feels they need to be locally involved, because really the only local involvement would be within the university, and they're not interested in being locally involved with an IEEE organization at that level.
yeah,
So
and those
I
people
think that's,
transition through. A lot of their students, they
Yeah.
transition through, right? And then you lose them once they're gone as students. You don't know where they're
that's
going to
right.
turn up.
They're
know.
generally not employed in Delaware.
Right. And those,
Yeah.
we'd really love to capture those. I mean, if you have a large population of students, it would be really nice to transition them into young professionals, find out where they are. You know?
Yeah, that would be good if we had some of the professors leaning in our direction. That's been the problem.
Let's see
Hey,
if we can do
Doug,
that.
Doug, do you remember the Science Olympiad
Yes,
that
that's still going. I'm still
that
active in that. Yeah.
okay, I've been totally dropped from the rules of that, so I have no idea what's happening there. Which is okay, because I wouldn't been able to function until this year anyway.
Okay.
But
Well, I can
I
get you
was gonna,
going.
pardon?
I can get you going with that again, I think.
Okay, because what I was going to point out is I was active there quite steady from 2014 to through 2019. Everything dropped off at the COVID year.
COVID, yeah.
But we had quite a few students that helped organize, and especially for typically high school juniors and seniors, really starting to work with those small credit card size computers like the Raspberry, the
Oh, yeah.
Arundel, Reno, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they still
and
do that.
okay, they still do that. So it seems like there's a lot of students who are working in that area. So if they're still doing that, there needs to be some way to
Well,
communicate with them to get into the
Yeah.
IEEE.
Charlie Bonsalot is in addition to being chairman, he's also the main organizer of that activity.
Yeah, okay. And
Okay,
that was my interaction with him. And
Wow, he must be busy. That's a lot to do.
Okay.
I
So
know
that's
it's a lot to do. I will send you guys an email
Okay.
about tomorrow before long. And
Yeah.
yeah, the meeting is at 8 o'clock tomorrow, so you'll have it before then. And it'll be a link to that great talk that I was telling you about. And I'll try to send it to everyone in the chapter if I can do it without making everyone crazy by sending it to too many people. All right. And I'll send you a link to a couple of the things we've done recently that have recordings. It might take me a little longer to make an email that has recordings.
no
that you-
worries, no worries.
All right.
Don't do it
Okay.
when you're tired. I understand that statement. I
Last time
I do the same thing. No emails after 5 or 6 o'clock.
yeah, it's just wrong. It's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Very nice to meet you guys.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Have a good
Ciao.
evening. Thank you.
You too. Bye. Bye.
Bye. And